Writing. The first thing I noticed was that she wasn't wearing shoes. Not slippers. Not sandals. Bare feet against the cracked pavement of our apartment parking lot, standing under the harsh afternoon sun like she had forgotten where she was supposed to go. Her hair was tied into a messy knot, and she held a grocery bag so tightly that one of the handles had already snapped. A jar of pasta sauce rolled near the curb while cars passed by without slowing down. She didn't move to pick it up. She just stared at it, exhausted in a way that looked heavier than sleep. That was the moment I made the joke that changed both our lives. If you're trying to escape life, I called from my balcony with a tired grin, come with me. I meant it casually. A stupid sentence thrown into the hot afternoon air because humor was easier than concern. I expected a small laugh. Maybe an eye roll. Instead, she looked up at me with eyes so hollow they almost frightened me. And before I could even finish saying, "I'm just heading to the coast for the weekend," she quietly answered, "Okay." The word hit me harder than it should have. If you believe kindness and second chances can change a life, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Storyverse. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts around the world. Her name was Mireya Sloan, and until that moment, she had only been the quiet neighbor from apartment 3B. We had lived across the hall from each other for almost 9 months without exchanging more than polite nods. She always looked like someone rushing toward an invisible emergency. Some mornings she left before sunrise wearing scrubs from the local nursing center. Some nights I heard muffled crying through the walls, followed by complete silence for days. I never asked questions. Most people in our building didn't. The world had become good at pretending not to notice pain as long as it stayed quiet. I walked downstairs to help her gather the spilled groceries, and when I got close enough, I realized her hands were trembling. Not slightly. Violently. Her face looked pale under the daylight, and there was a fading bruise near her wrist she tried to hide beneath her sleeve. "You okay?" I asked softly. She nodded too quickly. People who answer too fast are usually lying. I loaded the groceries into the back seat of my old truck while she stood there almost nervously, like she expected me to change my mind. The truth was, I had only planned a short day trip north to clear my head. My construction business had collapsed 6 months earlier after my business partner disappeared with most of the company's savings. Since then, life had shrunk into unpaid bills, sleepless nights, and long drives to nowhere. I wasn't trying to save anyone. I could barely save myself. But something about the way she stood there barefoot under that burning sun made it impossible to walk away. The drive started awkwardly. The air conditioner barely worked, and the silence between us felt fragile. Outside, the city slowly faded into long stretches of open highway lined with dry grass and faded billboards. Afternoon sunlight poured through the windshield, making everything look too bright to hide secrets. After nearly an hour, she finally spoke. "You really don't know me." It sounded less like a statement and more like a warning. "I know enough," I replied. She looked out the window for a long time after that. Then, slowly, pieces of her story began slipping out. She had moved to the city 2 years earlier with her fiancé, a man named Carter who promised her a better life away from her tiny hometown. At first, things were good. Then came the controlling behavior. Then isolation. Then the shouting. Then the apologies. Then worse things she couldn't say aloud without shaking. By the time she realized she needed to leave, she had nowhere left to go. No family nearby. No savings. No confidence. Fear had slowly turned her into someone she no longer recognized. 3 nights earlier, Carter had finally crossed a line that terrified her enough to run. She packed one bag while he slept and escaped to the apartment building across town using the last of her money. But he kept calling. Texting. Threatening. Promising to find her. "I haven't slept properly in days," she whispered. The highway stretched endlessly before us while her voice cracked apart beside me. I didn't know what to say. Sometimes people don't need advice. Sometimes they just need someone willing to sit beside the wreckage without looking away. We reached the coast town near evening. It was a small place filled with faded diners, fishing boats, and weathered wooden shops that looked frozen in another decade. The ocean breeze carried the smell of salt and seaweed through the streets. For the first time all day, I noticed Mireya breathe deeply. Like her lungs finally remembered how. I rented the cheapest motel room available and took the couch while she slept in the bed. Before falling asleep, she stood near the window watching the waves in silence. "You know what's strange?" she said quietly. "What?" "You didn't ask me to prove anything." I frowned. "About what?" "That I'm telling the truth." The sadness in her voice stayed with me long after the room went dark. The next morning, sunlight flooded through the curtains. I woke up to the smell of coffee and found Mireya sitting outside the motel room wrapped in an oversized hoodie, holding 2 paper cups. The ocean behind her shimmered gold beneath the rising sun. For the first time since meeting her, she looked almost peaceful. We spent the day wandering through the town like 2 people pretending not to be broken. We ate grilled fish from a street vendor near the docks. We watched children fly kites along the beach. We sat on an old wooden pier while waves crashed beneath us. And slowly, almost invisibly, the heaviness around her began to loosen. Not disappear. Just soften. That afternoon, we stopped at a tiny bookstore near the harbor. While browsing dusty shelves, I noticed her staring at a family photo displayed near the register. A mother, father, and little girl smiling beside a Christmas tree. Mireya suddenly looked away. "I used to want that," she admitted. "You still can." She gave me a sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. Not everyone gets happy endings. I wanted to argue with her. But life had taught me that hope sounds cruel to people who've suffered long enough. That evening, everything changed. We had just returned to the motel when her phone started ringing again. "Carter." She froze instantly. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Then another call came. And another. And another. Finally, a text appeared across the screen. "I know where you are." I watched the color drain from her face. Fear like that is impossible to fake. Within minutes, headlights appeared outside the motel parking lot. A black SUV. Mireya stopped breathing. "That's him." Every protective instinct inside me roared awake at once. I stepped outside before she could stop me. The ocean wind hit hard against my face as the SUV door slammed shut. Carter looked exactly like the kind of man who learned how to weaponize charm. Clean clothes. Calm expression. Controlled smile. But his eyes were cold. "You her boyfriend now?" he asked. "No." "Then stay out of it." He tried walking toward the room, but I blocked him. What happened next lasted less than a minute, but it felt endless. Carter's calm mask cracked fast when he realized Mireya wasn't coming back willingly. He shouted. Threatened. Called her ungrateful. Weak. Crazy. Then he made the mistake abusive people always make. He forgot witnesses change everything. The motel owner called the police before things escalated further. By the time officers arrived, Carter's performance had completely fallen apart. Rage spilled out openly now, ugly and desperate. Watching him get placed into the police car, Mireya began crying so hard she could barely stand. Not because she loved him. Because fear leaves scars long after danger disappears. That night she sat on the beach wrapped in a blanket while moonlight stretched silver across the waves. I stayed beside her quietly while the wind carried distant sounds of the ocean. "You know what hurts the most?" she whispered. "What?" I stayed because I thought no one else would ever choose me. Her words hit somewhere painfully familiar inside me. Because after losing my business, my friends, and almost everything I had built, I understood what it felt like to believe your value had expired. I looked at her for a long moment before speaking. He convinced you survival was the best you deserved. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. But you left anyway. The ocean crashed against the shore while she cried beside me under the cold night sky. And for the first time in years, I think both of us understood something important. Broken people don't always need fixing. Sometimes they just need proof they're still worth caring about. Weeks passed after we returned home. Carter was charged after police uncovered prior complaints from another woman. Mireya began therapy through a support center nearby. She started sleeping again. Smiling occasionally. Laughing even. Real laughter. The kind that surprises people who forgot they still had it inside them. As for me, life slowly shifted too. I found work repairing homes damaged by storms outside the city. The pay wasn't glamorous, but rebuilding things with my hands reminded me that ruined structures can still stand again with enough patience. One afternoon, months later, I came home exhausted and found a small box sitting outside my apartment door. Inside was a pair of white sneakers. New. Clean. Untouched. There was also a folded note in Mireya's handwriting. You noticed when nobody else did. I sat there staring at those shoes for a very long time. Because sometimes the smallest details reveal the biggest loneliness. And sometimes healing begins the moment someone finally sees you. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to subscribe to Storyverse for more emotional stories that remind us how powerful kindness can be. Special request before the ending. Comment below where you're watching from and tell us about one person whose kindness changed your life forever. A year later, Mireya and I returned to the same coastal town. The same pier. The same bookstore. The same ocean. But everything felt different now. She walked beside me confidently, sunlight dancing across her face while sea wind carried her laughter down the boardwalk. The fear that once lived in her eyes had faded into something warmer. Stronger. Peace. As we stood watching waves crash. Someone is already waiting for permission to hope.